Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. China's economy is stumbling. The World Bank President Kim is worried the end of global easing could spell big trouble. Pimco sees a 60% chance of a global recession in the next 3 years. Where do you want to start, Maurice?
Well, let's talk about China. I think there's an exaggeration there. You know, China, oh God, they're only going to increase
6%.
No, 7.5% this year, and they used to do 9, 10, 12. Well, people, it's like getting used to a certain lifestyle, and once somebody starts picking away at that lifestyle, it's not as great as it was.
Like I used to, I was used to the American lifestyle until they started picking it away on me.
Well, but you see, but then this is why austerity in Europe is killing Europe, because people that may have been getting twice what they got 20, 30 years ago, they don't want anything taken away. And once you take it away, they're going to fight you tooth and nail. China is still doing great, but we got used to the fact that in the middle 90s, you know, we talked about Deng Xiaoping, who's the guy that really started China on the entrepreneurial bit and made a miracle, an industrial miracle that's never been equal in the history out of China. But we got used to it. So China became the big demand factor for commodities, it became the big demand factor for our construction material, our machinery, and all the other things. Exports and countries all over the world. Well, now when China says they're not doing as well as they did maybe a year ago for a particular month, the whole market gets all upset about it. So China is still the big demand factor in the world, and China and let's say India certainly. If you take China and India out of the equation, we'd have the biggest not only recession, depression that this world has seen since the 1930s. So I would say I'm not concerned. China is shifting its activities more into internally, bringing people in and developing their industry and
because now they've got to support their own middle class, which they didn't have 25 years ago.
Well, do you know that there's more oil being used in China today than there is in the United States? Oil and its derivatives.
How much oil reserves does China have in their mainland? Do they hold a lot of oil there?
No, that's an excellent question. At one time, it's a good question because I know the answer. You go back about 30 years to China, they were an oil producer. They actually had a surplus. Oh, they got rid of that a long time ago. I mean,
but that's because they consume so much.
Yes, their consumption. But their consumption is so great now that whatever they have left in the fields that they have is insignificant. What they do have to, why do you think they're building the biggest navy in the world right now? This is what they're spending money, because they want to guarantee that the sea lanes from Africa, both West and Eastern Africa, that used to be the Portuguese colonies of Angola and Mozambique, and the fact that why do you think they support Iran in the national security in the United Nations Security Council, is because they are the largest purchasers of oil from Iran, and they are not signers to the basic limitations being put on Iran these days.
And while we're being distracted in other areas, they're moving into Africa very strongly right now and taking advantage of those resources, are they
Oh
not?
my God, not only that though, but they're also moving into Iraq. China is today the biggest factor. They're also...
Which that has to be one of the biggest slaps in the face.
I call it an irony, yeah.
To America of all time.
Well, that's where the stupidity of Bush came in. If we came in, nobody would have, they might have argued with him, why you guys are taking over the oil. Well, you know, we have to take them over to protect them. And so there are 10,000 excuses we could have given. If we had to give an excuse. Instead, they let it go. And now China is the beneficiary of the fact that 1.5 to 2 million barrels a day are being produced in Iraq today. And they are there are thousands of Chinese workers working now in the Iraqi oil fields and also plants that make the derivatives coming from the oil. But one thing they do is they integrate into the community. They're not, you know, they're not greedy, they're not capitalistic in their attitudes toward the people. And the people in the Middle East, they resent the old colonial system. They see the Chinese as somebody who was like them. You know, they were also being colonized and being abused. So they have a different attitude toward the Chinese. And the Chinese that work in these fields and so on, they get along.
Let's move on to the farm bill that just passed. $500 billion farm bill, and we're talking about, well, reports say that 80% of the farm bill is going towards food stamps. What is the guise here? I don't understand.
Well,
I
think
this country's
first
doing.
of all, 2/3 of all the farmland in this country today is owned by the huge agricultural
the
monopolies
Monsantos of the world.
Well, that's the chemical company. I'm talking about the ADM, the Archer Daniels Midland, and Conagra. You know, the guys that own the ethanol. By the way, was a relief act for the big farm company because they weren't making it on corn. The price was going down. Once they got the ethanol passed, in order to help them get out of the problems with their corn usage, now there are actually famines in certain parts of the world because more and more of the corn is being used for ethanol.
We haven't heard about ethanol in a while. We used to rail against ethanol back
from the very
3 or 4
beginning.
years ago,
Yeah.
5 years ago. It's hard to believe how fast time goes, but we haven't heard a lot about ethanol in the news in the past couple years.
Well, you see, part of that is because right now there's a mandate that 10% of all gallons of gas that are being sold have to have a 10% component of ethanol. They got rid of something called MTBE, which was much cheaper and was not based on agricultural products. And they said, no, it's cancer-inducing.
It wasn't a food staple.
It was not a food staple.
Which is pretty amazing that we would take something as basic as corn and try to turn it into...
But have you listened to what I said? This was done in order to support the big agribusinesses. That's why it was done. They're lobbyists. You know, this country passes legislation because of lobbyists. We are all living under the thumb of the lobbyists in this country. Where do most of the Congress people go when they get out of office? Either they choose to get out of office or they're voted out of office. Or Mary Bono Mack. I mean, she's a big lobbyist right now.
Kissinger, lobbyist to China. Albright, lobbyist to China.
That's my point. We are under the domination of lobbyists in this country. It's the most powerful group of influentials that the United States has.
Okay, the World Bank president says that the end of global easing, which is printing money,
Yes, of course.
could have dire consequences. Isn't the fact of printing more money, doesn't that have more dire consequences?
Not really, because we're at a very curious time right now. We've got a surplus of labor, we've got a surplus of commodities, we've got, you're throwing money out there, but it's not like the 60s and 70s and 80s when we had huge inflation because we were in a tight money situation and consequently there was too little money changing or too much money chasing whatever was available, and the labor unions were coming up with outlandish contracts. Everything was inflationary. Right now, even what the Fed, what the Fed is doing in this country is unbelievable. $85 billion.
A month.
A month. You multiply that times 12 and you got $1 trillion is being used to buy up what? Treasury, to participate in Treasury auctions. That's why the 10-year note was down as low as 1.4 at one time. Now it's back up around 220, but it was down artificially very, very low. It was really deflationary in that sense. Also, at the same time, they were buying up mortgage derivatives, debentures, which had no value. And
the mortgage-backed securities?
Exactly. They were sitting in the vaults of banks, and the banks didn't know what to do with it, so they couldn't loan any money because their arteries were clogged with all these debentures. So now $45 billion a month was used to participate in the auctions, and another $40 billion to get those things out of the banks. Well, they've done that. That's why the banks have never been in better shape, by the way. Our major banks in this country, whether it's Wells Fargo or J.P. Morgan Chase, or Bank of America, they're doing great. I mean, they've never had better numbers than they have right now because the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve have done a great job of bailing them out.
We only have about a minute and a half left. President Obama just recently met with the new Chinese president.
Yes.
We have a debt ceiling crisis coming up again.
We do.
Very shortly.
September 30th.
Do you think that was partially the reason for that meeting? Was he looking for more money from China?
No, I think that was strictly a photo op. That's basically the new president of China. He was in Mexico, and it was just the whole thing was the Allerton, not the Allerton. I'm getting into something else here. The Annenberg Estates thought this would be great for them. It was good for the Coachella Valley. It was good for Rancho Mirage. The whole thing was nothing. The thing that's very unusual. Xi Jinping, the new president of China, he and his wife were invited. So what happened, Obama did not bring his wife because she had to be with the children who were getting ready for their summer vacation.
And the Chinese took that as a snub, did they not?
Not only took it as a snub, they took it as a slap in the face of the worst type.
And wouldn't you?
Well, but you remember, the Orientals are much more subtle about snubs, and they don't ever forget it. I think our relations with China are going to be much worse than ever were. The only thing that was done, the Chinese would have done it anyway. They started putting the screws down on North Korea because the Chinese realized having this crazy guy, Kim Jong-un, suddenly make crazy statements about sending nuclear missiles against the United States. That's a little too much, and they don't need that. They were using North Korea to frighten the Japanese.
That's their pit bull.
That's a little.
They take the leash off whenever they want to scare people.
That's exactly what they were doing because China can crush them, not militarily. They just don't send any food in there.
Cut off the pipeline.
That's all they have to do. So I think the Chinese were going to do anyway. I think this meeting out here was strictly a photo opportunity, and to me, I was offended for the Chinese when our president placed 2 rounds of golf in the 2 days that he was here.
With his high school buddies.
Yeah, with people, I saw the names, I never heard of any of them.
And it cost us millions of dollars. We need to take a quick break. We will return with our Political Insider, Global Outlook, and History segments. For any show information regarding times, channels, if you'd like to email us with a comment, just log on to our website. We also have segments of the show if you missed any segment on theworldreport.org. Stick around. We'll be right back.